She walked into the ranch like she owned it. He let her keep it. The deed was on the table when she knocked. Not the door, the side post. 3 sharp knocks on the wood frame, like she was done waiting for someone to notice her. I had the deed spread out under the lamp because I'd been studying it for 2 hours, trying to find the corner where Aldous Pryor had slid his thumb. There's always a place. A man like Pryor always leaves a thumb. But I hadn't found it yet, and then those 3 knocks came, and I folded the paper and went to the door. She was standing in the dark with a carpet bag and a horse that looked as tired as I felt. Behind her, the yard was just black shapes. The corral post, the water tank, the line of cottonwoods down by the creek. No moon worth mentioning. She had a shawl pulled around her shoulders, and her hair was coming loose from whatever she'd pinned it into. And she looked at me the way a woman looks at a man she's already decided about. "You're Callum Brace," she said, not a question. "I am." "I'm Nora Aldrin. My husband was Thomas Aldrin. He owned the east parcel, the quarter section between your north fence and Pryor's Gray's land." I knew Thomas Aldrin, not well. He'd come out from Ohio 4 years back, bought that parcel, worked it quietly. Died of fever the previous October. I'd heard there was a widow. "He did own it," I said. "Come in." She looked at the horse first, checked the lead rope, checked the saddle bags were still buckled. Then she came in. That was the first thing I noticed about Nora Aldrin. She thought about her horse before she thought about herself. I'd built this place in 1868. Came out from Missouri with a mule, $200, and a bad knee from Chickamauga that hadn't healed right and never would. Found the creek, found the grass, dug the first foundation by hand. Put up a 1-room house and spent the first winter almost entirely alone. A man named Dupree worked for me the 2nd year and the 3rd, and then Dupree married a woman in town and moved to a proper house, and I didn't blame him. I hired hands as I needed them and let them go when the work was done. That was just the way of it. I was 41 years old when Nora knocked on my door. I had a 3-room house by then, a barn that didn't leak, 620 acres under my name, and a herd that would make most men in this valley look twice. I had a bad knee and a coffee habit, and I slept 4 hours some nights because I'd lie there running numbers in my head. I had no wife, and I'd stopped thinking about that particular absence the way you stop thinking about a sore tooth once it's pulled. The valley was changing. That was the thing. Men like Aldous Pryor had come in the last 5 years with capital behind them, Eastern money, railroad money, and they didn't buy land so much as they accumulated it. They found the small parcel men and the widows, and they applied pressure. Pryor had taken 3 parcels in 2 years. He was quiet about it, always had paperwork, always had a lawyer named Geary who wore a brown suit and smiled when he talked. Geary's smile was the worst thing about him. Thomas Aldrin's east parcel was the next piece Pryor needed. It sat between Pryor's Grays and my north fence like a stopper in a bottle. With it, Pryor could run his cattle across the whole upper bench and push to the river. Without it, he was landlocked on the north. He needed that quarter section the way a man needs air. Thomas Aldrin had died in October and left a widow, and Pryor had moved in January. I knew this because I had a friend named Harlan Sykes who worked for the county clerk, and Harlan had mentioned, over a drink at the Territorial, that a deed transfer had been filed on the Aldrin parcel. Aldous Pryor, grantee. I'd asked Harlan to pull the filing. He'd looked uncomfortable and said he probably shouldn't. I'd bought him another drink, and he'd looked more uncomfortable and said he really probably shouldn't. I'd put money on the bar without counting it, and Harlan had gone quiet and said he'd see what he could do. That was 3 weeks before Nora Aldrin knocked on my side post. She sat at my table and told me the story in plain sentences. Thomas had been sick by September, bad by mid-October, gone by the 22nd. She'd buried him on the property. In November, a man named Geary had come to her with papers. He was friendly, she said. He explained that Thomas had borrowed against the property in the spring, $200, collateralized against the land. He showed her a promissory note. Thomas's signature was on it. She pulled a folded piece of paper from inside her shawl and set it on the table. I picked it up. It was a copy. She'd been smart enough to make a copy before she gave the original back, she said, which had made Geary's smile go briefly flat. I read it. Thomas Aldrin's signature at the bottom, Aldous Pryor's name as the lender. Did Thomas borrow money from Pryor? I asked. Thomas never spoke of Aldous Pryor once, she said. Not in 4 years. We didn't socialize. We didn't need to. Could he have borrowed without telling you? She looked at me steadily. She had dark eyes, steady as a leveled gun. Thomas told me everything. We had $31 when he died. If there had been $200 in this household at any point in the last 4 years, I would have known. I believed her, not because she was a woman and women don't lie, that's not a thing I'd say, but because her certainty had a particular quality. It wasn't the certainty of someone who'd talked themselves into believing something. It was the certainty of someone who knew the shape of their own life. Geary says the note was called when Thomas died, she said. Pryor holds the land now. I have 30 days to clear my possessions from the house. How many of those 30 days are left? She looked at her hands. 8. I looked at the copy of the promissory note. I looked at the deed I'd folded up when she knocked. I looked at the lamp on the table between us. She didn't ask me anything. She didn't say please. She just sat there with that carpet bag beside her chair and waited to see what kind of man I was. I've been looking at your husband's deed, I said. The original recording. My husband's deed, she said. Yes, mine now. Yes, yours. I unfolded my copy, set it beside hers, showed her what I'd been studying, the corner Harlan had found when he'd finally pulled the filing. The transfer to Pryor had a date stamp in the upper right corner, March 14. The promissory note Geary had shown her, the copy she'd made, had an execution date of April 2. She looked at the 2 dates, then she looked at me. The transfer was recorded, I said, 3 weeks before the loan was made. She said nothing for a moment. The lamp hummed. Outside, the horse shifted its weight in the yard. They transferred the deed, she said slowly, before there was even a note, before Thomas supposedly agreed to anything. That's what those dates say. How does that happen? It happens, I said, when a man fills in a date after the fact and doesn't notice the order of the paperwork. She sat back in her chair. She pressed her palms flat on the table and sat back and breathed out long through her nose. Geary made an error. Geary's careful, I said, but he wasn't careful enough. She looked at me again with those level eyes. What do I do with this? Tonight, nothing. Your horse needs water and you need sleep. There's a room off the back. I stood up. Tomorrow I ride to town. Her name was Nora, but she introduced herself to my hands as Mrs. Aldrin, and they called her that without being asked to. My foreman, a Texan named Roy Cass who'd been with me 6 years, took one look at her the morning after she arrived. She was already at the corral checking her horse's off front hoof, which had picked up a stone on the road, and he said to me quietly, "She going to be here a while?" "Don't know yet," I said. "Good," he said, which was not what I'd expected, and walked off. I rode to town. I went to see Harlan Sykes at the county clerk's office, and I laid the 2 dates in front of him without comment and watched his face. Harlan was not a corrupt man. He was a careful man who'd let careful slide into careless. He looked at the dates for a long time. "I filed what was brought to me," he said. "I know. I didn't examine the underlying. I know, Harlan." He was quiet. "This is going to cause a problem." "Yes, it is. Pryor's got a lot of friends in this county." "So do I said. "And I'm asking you to pull the transfer and mark it defective filing on the record today." Harlan looked at me for a long time. He was thinking about what came next. I could see him running through it. Pryor would come at him. Geary would come at him. There might be a job at stake, maybe more than a job. I didn't make it easier for him by looking away. He needed to see that I was serious, and I needed him to see it. "You'll stand behind this," he said. "In any room you need me in," I said. "Pryor wants to challenge the reversal. He challenges it with me on the other side." Harlan pulled the filing that afternoon. I was in his office when he did it. He made a note in the record. Defective, procedural irregularity in date sequence, transfer voided pending review. Then he looked at me like a man who's just stepped off a ledge and isn't sure if there's ground below. I thanked him and rode back to the ranch. Pryor came 3 days later. He came with 2 men I recognized as hands from his outfit, big men, nothing wrong with them individually, just men doing a job, and he came with Geary. I was at the far end of the north pasture checking fence line when Roy rode out and told me. I finished the fence post I was setting. Roy watched me do it without saying anything. Then I mounted up, and we rode back together. Pryor was standing in the yard. Geary was beside him with his brown suit and his briefcase. The 2 hands were back by the gate. Nora was standing on the porch. She wasn't hiding behind the door. She was standing on the porch with her arms at her sides, and she was watching Pryor the way she'd watched me that first night, measuring him, deciding about him. Pryor hadn't seen me riding yet. He was talking to her in the reasonable voice men like Pryor use, explaining something. Patient, almost kind, the way you speak to someone you've already decided doesn't know what's good for them. I dismounted, handed Roy the reins, walked across the yard. Pryor heard me and turned. He was about 50, heavy in the shoulders, with a gray beard kept short. He wore a good hat. The hat bothered me slightly. Men who take care of their hats often take care of the wrong things. "Brace," he said. "Pryor, this is a private matter between me and Mrs. Aldrin." "Not anymore," I said. "She's staying on this property. That makes it my business." Geary stepped forward with his briefcase. "Mr. Brace, I understand you've been to the county clerk's office and involved yourself in a filing that—" "The filing was defective," I said. "Harlan Sykes has documented it. If you want to contest that, you'll file a challenge with the court in Territorial City, and you'll do it with a full date audit on your paperwork." I looked at him. I've already spoken to a man in Territorial City about what that audit would find. I had not yet spoken to anyone in Territorial City, but I had a letter drafted and ready to go with the next post writer, and Geary didn't know the difference. The smile went off Geary's face again, the way it had when Nora made her copy. It went off and didn't come back. Pryor looked at me steadily. He was not a stupid man. He was calculating, measuring the distance between what he wanted and what it would cost him. "You're making an enemy," he said. "I've had enemies," I said. "I'm still here." He stood there another moment. Then he looked at Nora on the porch, and whatever he'd decided was behind his eyes, and he turned and walked back to the gate. Geary followed. The two hands opened the gate for them, and they rode out. Roy came to stand beside me. We watched them go. After a minute he said, "You want me to put a man on the north fence tonight?" "2," I said. "Done." The letter went to Territorial City the next morning. I had a contact there, a lawyer named Pemberton, who was not friendly to Aldous Pryor. The situation was the kind Pemberton called interesting, meaning he smelled blood in the water. He wrote back inside a week. There was, he said, a pattern. The Aldrin parcel was not the first time Geary had filed paperwork with a date problem. There had been 2 other transfers in the last 3 years, small ones. Parcels owned by people with less recourse than Nora Aldrin. I went back to Harlan Sykes with Pemberton's letter. Harlan read it at his desk. He looked older than he had the first time. A thing had settled on him, and he was carrying it. "I should have looked closer," he said. "Yes," I said. "I'll cooperate with whatever the court needs." "I know you will." I wasn't angry at Harlan. That wouldn't have helped anything. What I needed was a man who'd cooperate and sign what needed signing, and that's what I got. It took 6 weeks. Pemberton filed. Pryor's lawyer, a different lawyer from Territorial City, not Geary, tried twice to slow it down and couldn't. The date irregularities were on the record. The other 2 transfers were examined. Geary, it came out later, had left the territory before the first hearing. Just gone. Brown's suit, briefcase, and all of it. Gone. Pryor himself was never charged with anything. That's the way it usually goes with men like Pryor. The man who holds the pen takes the fall, and the man who hired the pen is disappointed, regrettably, that such an irregularity occurred. He paid restitution on the 2 earlier parcels. He stayed in the valley, kept his land, kept his outfit. He and I did not speak for the better part of 2 years, and when we did it was at a water rights meeting where we were both civil and nothing more. The east parcel went back to Nora Aldrin, free and clear, confirmed by the court in Territorial City on a Tuesday in late April. I rode home from the clerk's office with the confirmation in my coat, and when I came into the yard, she was at the corral again. She seemed to spend a lot of time at the corral. I didn't ask why. Some people think near horses. I got down and walked over and handed her the paper through the fence rails. She read it once, looked up, looked back down at it. Then she said, "Thomas would have liked you." That's all, no speech, no tears, nothing theatrical. Just that in a plain voice, like she was reporting a fact. I said he was a good man from what I knew of him. "He was," she said. And then she looked at me with that level look, not measuring any more but just seeing, and she said, "What do I owe you?" "Nothing," I said. "There's no such thing as nothing," she said. "I'm not a woman who owes debts she can't name." "Then we'll settle it some other time," I said, and I went inside. She stayed. That might need explaining, and maybe it doesn't. She had her own parcel to work. She had Thomas's house, Thomas's small herd, Thomas's tools. She had work of her own, and she did it. But the east parcel shared a fence line with my north boundary and a water easement that ran through my land, and there were practical reasons to be in contact. Roy rode over sometimes to help her with the larger jobs. I rode over sometimes for the same reason. The summer passed that way. She never asked for what she could do herself. When she needed help, she asked directly without pretense about it, said plainly what she needed, thanked you plainly when it was done, didn't make more of it than it was. I'd known men who couldn't operate that way. She made it look natural. I noticed things. The way she moved through her yard, efficient, purposeful, nothing wasted. The way she talked to her horse, not baby talk but low and steady, like she was explaining something and expected it to understand. The way she'd disagree with you flat out when she thought you were wrong, no hedging, no softening it up, and then if you made a better argument she'd say so just as directly. One evening in August I was riding back from the east pasture and I stopped at her fence. She was splitting wood. I watched her for a minute. She had her sleeves rolled and she was setting the splits with a kind of controlled precision, same swing every time, clean through. She knew I was there. She didn't stop. "You're low on cord for winter," I said. "I know," she said. "Working on it. I've got a man coming this week to split mine. I can send him over after." She set another piece on the block, swung, split, set the halves aside. Then she leaned the axe against the block and looked at me. "Why?" she asked. It wasn't unfriendly. It was the same directness. She wanted to know the reason. I said, "Because it's a long winter and a woman alone out here on a place. This size goes through cord faster than she can split it herself." And I looked at her. She was waiting, and she wasn't going to let me off with a practical reason when there was something else to say. "And I don't want you to freeze," I said, "or work yourself down before November." She looked at me for another moment. "All right," she said. "I'd be grateful. Not thank you, not oh that's so kind. I'd be grateful, like it was a transaction between equals." I rode home with something in my chest that I hadn't bothered to put a name to yet. The trouble with Pryor didn't end with the court ruling. A man like that doesn't end. In September, 2 of Nora's cattle turned up missing. Could have strayed. Could have been rustled. I didn't know, and neither did she, but she came over in the morning and told me plainly, and I rode the fence line with her. We found where the wire had been cut and bent back on the side of her property that abutted Pryor's graze. I didn't say his name, neither did she, but we both knew the shape of the thing. Roy and I rebuilt that fence the next day. I put it back better than it was, new posts, good wire, strung tight. Then I rode over to Pryor's east line and I sat on my horse at the boundary and I waited. He came out after about 20 minutes, rode up to the line without crossing it. We looked at each other across the cut grass. "I hear you've had some fence trouble," he said. "Fixed it," I said. "Things happen to fence lines." "Not twice they don't," I said, "not to hers." He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded, the way a man nods when he's filing something away rather than agreeing to anything, turned his horse and rode back. The cattle didn't come back, we never found them, but the fence held. That fall, 2 things happened close together. One, Nora found a new steer straight in from the south, no brand she recognized, healthy and young. She kept it with her herd. Could have been a stray, could have been something else. She didn't say and I didn't ask. 2, she came over one evening just at dark and knocked on my door, the door this time, not the post. And when I opened it, she had a pot in her hand, a covered pot with a cloth around the handle, and she held it out and said, "I made a stew. Too much for one. You should take this." I took the pot. She stood on the step. I stood in the doorway. There was lamplight behind me and the last cold light of a fall sky behind her. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I owe you." I said nothing, I said. "You said we'd settle it later," she said. "This is later." I held the pot. It was warm through the cloth. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "I did what was right. That's not a debt." She looked at me with those level dark eyes. "I know it isn't," she said. "That's not what I'm talking about." The wind moved through the cottonwoods down by the creek. A horse somewhere shifted its weight and the corral post groaned. The sky was going purple to black. "Then what are you talking about?" I said. She looked at me long enough that I started to feel the cold in the air. "I've been thinking," she said. about whether a woman who knows how to live alone is a woman who should. I stood there with the warm pot in my hands, and I didn't say anything for a moment. Mostly because I wasn't sure, for a moment, if I was understanding her correctly, and I didn't want to be wrong about it. "Is that a thing you're figuring out?" I said, "or a thing you've figured out?" A very small thing changed around her mouth. Not a smile exactly, something underneath a smile. "I think I've figured it out," she said. I moved back from the door, not a lot, just enough. She looked at the space I'd made and she came in. She moved her things to the ranch in November, just before the first snow. She didn't move them all at once. She moved them in loads the way she did everything practical and orderly, the things that needed to come first coming first. Her tools, her kitchen things. 3 boxes of Thomas's books, which she arranged on the shelf I built for them along the south wall. Her horse, which she put in my barn and introduced to my horses with the same low explanatory tone she always used. Roy watched her second load come in. He was leaning on the fence post with his arms crossed, watching her direct her horse to the hitching rail, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read exactly. "Told you," he said. "You didn't tell me anything," I said. "I said it was good," he said. "When she first got here, told you then." He walked off toward the barn before I could say anything to that. The east parcel we kept separate in title for a while. Nora was particular about it. That was Thomas's ground, she said, his work in it. She wanted it to stay Aldrin land a while longer. I understood that and said so. What she meant, I think, what she never said in so many words, was that Thomas had been a good man who'd built something and lost it through no fault of his own, and she was going to hold that ground in his name until it felt right to fold it into something new. I thought about that in the way you think about a thing you respect too much to push at. The winter was cold and long. The kind of winter the plains manufacture specifically, I think, to sort out who belongs here and who doesn't. We were inside a lot. She read. I did books and repaired things. She had an opinion about almost everything, and she stated those opinions without asking permission. And when I had a different opinion, we argued it out, and whichever one of us was right was right. That was just the way we operated. One night in January, she was sitting across the table from me reading, and I was looking at a map of the North Pasture trying to work out a water problem, and I looked up at some point, and she was watching me over the top of her book. When I looked up, she didn't look away. "What?" I said. "Nothing," she said. "You look like you're arguing with the map." "The map is wrong about where the water sits," I said. "Then redraw it," she said. She went back to her book. I looked at the map. Then I put the map down and looked at her, the lamplight on the side of her face, her reading with the book held close the way she did when she was absorbed in it. I thought about what it had cost her to come out here. Ohio to Kansas by herself 4 years ago with a husband she trusted and a determination I still hadn't fully measured. Thomas dead in October and Pryor at her door in November, and a valley full of men who'd have told her to take what was offered and go back east. She hadn't gone back east. She'd come to my door at night with a carpet bag and a tired horse and knocked on the post 3 times like she was done waiting. There are men who get to the end of their lives and what they can say is that they built something. That's not nothing. I'd built something. Ranch under my name, herd under my name, ground I'd broken with my own 2 hands and a mule and a bad knee. I'd done that. But there's a difference between building something and having someone stand in it with you who chose to be there. That's a different weight in the chest. A good weight. She turned a page without looking up. "The water problem," she said, still reading. "Check where the ground dips east of the 3rd post. I noticed it last fall. There might be a channel." I looked at the map. There was a place east of the 3rd post where the map showed level ground, but she was right that it tended to slope in a way that didn't match the notation. "When did you look at that?" I said. "September," she said. "When we were checking the fence." She'd been looking at my water problem in September, 2 months before she moved in, and filed it away and said nothing about it until I needed it. I said, "I'll write it tomorrow." "I'll come," she said. She turned another page. We rode it the next morning, cold and clear, the frozen ground ringing under the horses. She was right about the slope. There was a natural channel that could be opened with a half-day's work and redirected the water problem entirely. I'd had that map for 4 years and missed it. I told her she was right about the channel. She said she knew. I didn't say anything else about it. I dismounted and walked the line with her, and we figured the work together, both of us standing in the cold looking at the ground, her pointing where the cut should go, me saying where I thought it would drain. She had a good eye for terrain. Better than mine, probably, in the way some people can read landscape like a thing written down. After we'd worked it out, she went back to her horse and I went to mine. And I stood there for a moment at my horse's shoulder, looking at the frozen grass and the creek and the far line of my north fence, and Pryor's grays beyond it, and the blue sky above all of it. 51 years old, 23 years in this valley. I'd held onto this ground through drought, through bad beef prices, through 2 years when I wasn't sure I'd make it. I'd done it alone mostly, except for hired men who came and went, and I'd thought that was just the shape of my life. A man builds something and keeps it. That's what you do. That's enough. She came up beside me. Her horse blew a cloud of steam. She looked where I was looking. "It's good country," she said. "Yeah," I said. A pause, the wind off the plains. The cottonwoods down by the creek rattled dry. "Callum," she said. I looked at her. She was looking at me the way she'd looked at me that night on the step with the warm pot between us. That look she had when she'd already decided something and was just saying it plain. "I want to tell you something," she said. I waited. I came to your door that night because I'd heard you were the one man in this valley who might listen. That you were hard but fair and you weren't Pryor's man and you'd held your ground when other men didn't. She paused. I came to your door for help, that's why I came. I know, I said. But that's not why I stayed, she said. The cold air was very still. My horse shifted his weight, her horse was quiet. I stayed, she said, because of the way you put the deed on the table and didn't make me ask, and the way you went to town without any guarantee it would work, and the way you sat on the boundary line and waited for Pryor, not with anger, just with presence, like you were the fixed point. She stopped. Then, you're a fixed point, Callum, you know that? Most men I've known are moving all the time, towards something, away from something. You're just here. Like you were always going to be here. I didn't say anything. She reached across the space between the horses and put her hand on my forearm, gloved over my coat sleeve, and she didn't look away. I'm glad I knocked on your post, she said. The cold was in my lungs, and the sky was blue all the way to the edge of it, and my ground ran out to the fence line, and her ground started after it, and somewhere down in the creek bed, the cottonwoods were knocking dry limbs together in the wind, that hollow sound, like a clock. I'm glad you did too, I said, which was the plainest thing I'd said in a long time, and the truest. She let go of my arm. We rode back to the ranch together in the cold. Spring came. She had the east parcel put into both names in April, her choice. I didn't ask for it. She came in one morning with the paperwork from the county clerk, new county clerk, Harlan Sykes having taken a quieter job by then. And she laid it on the table the way I'd laid the deed that first night, and she looked at me and said, Thomas would have wanted this. I signed it. Roy Cass shook my hand that evening at the corral. He didn't say much. He wasn't a man for much, just the handshake and a look that said what it said. The valley changed slowly after that. Pryor sold off his upper grays in 1882, and the eastern money found another interest somewhere else, and the small parcel men who'd been squeezed mostly came back or were replaced by men who'd do the same work without the squeeze. It wasn't a moral story. It was just the way the land went, indifferent to all of it. What I know is this: I'm an old man now. My knee is worse than it was. There are mornings I lie there for a while before I get up, running numbers in my head the same as always, but now I hear her in the kitchen before I rise, and I know the coffee will be made when I get there. And I know she'll have an opinion about whatever I have to do that day. And I know she'll be right about half of it and wrong about the other half, and we'll argue out which is which. She walks through this ranch like she owns it. She does. I built it with my hands, and I held it alone for 23 years, and the best thing about it now is that it's hers. She walked in one night in the dark with a carpet bag and a tired horse and 3 knocks on the post, and I opened the door, and she looked at me the way you look at a man you've already decided about. She decided right.